My name is Puveshini, and I'm 33 this year. I just turned 33. And I grew up I think my family background reflects my work a lot, especially coming from a very traditional Indian family, being a girl, and then, my choices was always questioned, whatever choices it is, whether it's the choice of how you wear your hair, the kind of clothes you wear, the kind of people you mingle with, the kind of perceptions, thoughts that you have. So it has always been something I feel like my whole life has been gearing me up towards my career in psychology and to apply whatever experiences I've had with my family into my work and when I'm seeing my clients. So I can relate to them, I can understand that struggle from a daughter's point of view or from a cultural point of view. So that's basically it. I have a young child. So my son is only 1+, like almost 1.5. So I think I've had the privilege of being in the traditional 9 to 5 job, and also currently I'm freelancing. So life has been different when in these two settings. So when it was 9 to 5, it's typical. You get up, you go to work, you spend time seeing clients, arranging. I was working in a university then. I was attached to Sunway. So it will be like, seeing clients and also arranging talks or training sessions. Or I was in charge of mentoring the underprivileged scholars during my time in Sunway. So planning sessions with them, planning activities with them. So those were stuff that I did. And then at 5, then you're done and you go back, right? So that's one routine that some clinical psychologists might go through, and I've been through that. And the other side now, what I do is every day it varies. So some days I would be meeting clients, some days I would be doing reporting, some days I would be going to schools. Like I also go into schools and see students there. And sometimes I go into corporate companies to give talks or trainings or webinars and stuff like that. So it really differs from a day to day, and ad hoc projects come up. Like if a school suddenly needs me to go in and do assessments, then that will be arranged ad hoc. So every week, every day, it's a different thing altogether. So work starts and ends at different times. And I also find time to volunteer. So that also takes up a different set of time. So yeah, it's very like flexible, very fluid in a way. Currently, the way I have structured my career has been very fluid. I think gender topics about gender and the difference and discrimination and stuff that happens around it has been an interest of mine even since I was in school, even before psychology, even before anything, just by observing the different standards society has for women and men. And so that has been a personal interest. So after I finished psychology, a degree in psychology, I was applying for jobs. And WAO had an opening for a social worker. So when you tell people you're a social worker, people think you're just basically volunteering and not getting paid. But it's a paid job, and your job is basically providing support and information-based counseling for survivors of domestic violence. So WAO's main pool of people they work with is survivors of domestic violence. But of course, any form of gender violence survivors are welcome, especially women. So I had the exposure of working with them, learning up the laws surrounding gender-based violence, what can happen, how is the system, the structure, like when you go to the police station, when you go to the courts, when you go to the JKM, the Kebajikan, the welfare department. So what happens there? So I learned a lot from them. And so I think since then, from being a social worker to when I resigned my job, I joined them as a member. And then I served on the board, on the exco board. So I've been a secretary, an assistant secretary, an assistant treasurer, an exco member. So just going all around and just being in the board for a very long time. And I think I just took a break like 2 years back is when I stopped because I was pregnant and I wanted to just focus on my family. for the time being. But I'm always still am affiliated with them. I would still, I am a member, and I think I'll always be a member. So yeah, so that will be an ongoing thing. And whatever I talk about, my webinars, or I'm also involved in a lot of women's groups on Facebook, support groups. So I'm like an advisor. I talk about more mental health stuff pertaining to specifically women in crisis, or women who are mothers, or women who are in some relationship crisis. Yeah. So that's an ongoing thing.
What would you say is like the most fulfilling, like gives the biggest rewards about this career?
The biggest reward I get is, I think, being able to share my knowledge and being able to help people, or support people in their journey of healing. So it's not like major stuff, right? So even small things, like if you have a client who tells you that, you know what, I could get up and shower today. I wasn't able to do it, but now I can. That's already a win. That's amazing for them. And you feel like, wow, you know, you had a hand in this. It's not all you, but you had some part to play within that context. And you see them getting to do like one thing after another, slowly, step by step. I think that's really fulfilling. It's slow, but it's fulfilling. The faster dopamine shots you can get through giving talks and presentations and stuff, because people directly come up to you and say, you know, like, oh, thank you for that, or I resonated with this. So then you see that immediate effect. But with clients, it's a bit slower, but you still get that when it's fulfilling to know that all this studying, all these courses, all these workshops has somehow given fruit to this, or it has done some good. Because most of the time you won't know. You're just walking in the dark and just doing what you do and hoping and praying that they are fine. But when they actually display these kind of things, it's really important for us to catch and to motivate ourselves as well. And you can get that even, like, you know, if you volunteered in NGOs like WAO or AWAM or stuff like that, when you actually work with clients. And I had this amazing experience when I worked with a refugee family in WAO. And then I moved to UNHCR, where I was working in a sister organization to UNHCR to resettle people. And this same family were my clients there as well. And so I got to see this woman come in as a abused wife, abused mother. This kid's really lost. She had 4 kids at that time. And I could see her progression, like from that to getting her resettlement papers, and now finally resettling in US. And the whole family is in US right now, and the children are thriving, they're going to school, and you know, and so it's so nice to see that whole change. And even the local women who have done something with their life, they're now working, and these are women who have never worked in their life before at all, and now they're working and they're putting on makeup and they're going out and they're enjoying life and they're raising their kids. And it's just amazing to see that you were part of their journey. When I joined my undergraduate, I didn't think of clinical psychology. I didn't even know about clinical psychology. So I went in thinking I was going to pursue a child psychology master's and pursue my career as a child psychologist. But I think after I joined, because in the first year you get kind of exposed to different types of psychology. So there's biopsychology, there's cognitive psychology, and a whole bunch of different types of psychology. So I think at that time I had lecturers who were clinical psychologists who were very inspiring, and the subject matter was something that I was very interested in, to understand the psyche of people and why they do what they do, and how it sometimes, you know, when you become like, you know, emotions that you feel on a regular basis, when it becomes over the board, or you underfeel stuff, or you overfeel stuff, how does it then affect you, the kind of symptoms you show and stuff like that, and how you can help these people, the intervention. So that then piqued my interest, and I felt clinical psychology was broader, because you can also work with children and you can also work with adults. So I felt the breadth was bigger and wider, and it interests me. And I think initially, when I was still impressionable first year student, I was just very, very amazed by the clinical psychologist lecturers, because they just had this different flair and the different way of present. I don't know what it is compared to the other lecturers. Were all great. We had different types of psychology lecturers. They were all great, but I was particularly drawn to the clinical psychologists who were my lecturers. So like I wanted to be like them. So that it started that, and then I liked the subject as well, and then I just pursued that after. This is Dr. Ng Wai Sheng, and she was my clinical psychology lecturer in uni, and so I was always like impressed by how she would teach and how she would conduct her classes and the kind of thought process that goes into conceptualizing a case. And I was very awed by, we often think like when you're diagnosing somebody, right? You look at I'm not sure if you're like exposed to DSM. Do you all know about the DSM? Yeah. So when you're exposed to DSM, it's very easy to just look at everybody and say, okay, you fit all this criteria, and therefore you are, you have major depressive disorder, or you have social anxiety, or whatever. But I think the way that we have been trained is to look at a client from so many different aspects. You look at them through the biology, the psychology, the social, the spiritual, and especially the spiritual part where she was talking about it, and how we cannot kind of remove that, especially from the cultural context that we are in. Especially in Malaysia, it's like a melting pot of different cultures. So you cannot take that away, that spiritual element that could be a reason why this person is acting the way they are acting. So even if you look at like in Thaipusam, people have trance, all right, even that could be a form of DID, but because it's culturally influenced, so it's not, you cannot say that this person has a dissociative identity disorder, even though they react that same way and they show all the symptoms. So it's about looking at that cultural aspect, the spiritual aspect, and really looking at people as people instead of just giving them labels. I think that kind of shifted my whole perspective of how I am a psychologist and how I practice as a psychologist. So even now, I don't believe in giving people diagnosis like one after another, like comorbidity, like like so many people have like 5 comorbid diagnosis. And like I've had clients who come up and say, okay, my ex-psychologist diagnosed me with bipolar and borderline and PTSD, and so it's basically just checking off all the boxes. But when you listen to their story, you understand what is going on. You actually know that actually this person only has PTSD, and all the other behaviors are a reflection of that, the reflection of that trauma that they have gone through. That is why they are behaving this way. They are triggered, and then they go into the hypervigilance and they act out differently. So it's about giving that context, understanding it like that. So I think she gave me that, and it's greatly influenced how I see my clients and how I interact and work with my clients. And that can be also can backfire us as psychology scholars, because whoever you see, even if you see a rapist, you will always try to understand what's the background, where was the learning from, so you know that, okay, this is a wrong, heinous crime, they shouldn't have done it, but it also forces you to look at it, and it becomes so normalized for us to do that sometimes, and this is just like a general thing, like sometimes in our own lives, even when we are in abusive situations or violent situations, we become so understanding because we start seeing them as a psychologist. Like, oh, I understand this person is like this because his parents are like this is his learning, or this is her way of talking because she's been brought up this way. And then sometimes we might find ourselves stuck in situations where we end up being like the psychologist in our personal relationship. So that's something that we have to really be mindful of, to like kind of switch off that role when we are in personal relationships, so it doesn't affect us. I think to excel in this field, because it's not something like medicine or engineering or a structured field like that, where you study something, you go in and the field changes, but what you're doing doesn't change that much, right? But when it's a study of psychology and you're dealing with people, the kind of expectations that people have, the trends that that happens in society, all of that affects how you actually function and how you carry out your duties and your responsibilities as a psychologist. So being, up to date, being flexible, being adaptable is very important. So a lot of times people will ask me, I get students asking me a lot, like on LinkedIn and stuff, like, what's the career prospects? What's out there for me? What can I do? My answer would be, what do you want to do? And what is your inkling? So if you're a very safe person, right? You like things planned out. You like a 9 to 5. You like things like that. You can still pursue a career in psychology, but chances might be limited, especially now. It's a growing field, but there's very few, like, colleges and educational institutions, they always look for counselors because they've been here for a longer time. I think clin psych's a very growing field that people are just getting to know about, and the stigma about mental health and mental health issues are still very, very much widely spread and widely understood and believed. So there are going to be challenges. So if you're not going to be adaptable, you're not going to change the way you practice and how you practice and be flexible with that, it might be very difficult. Like, so for me, it worked very well for me because I like talking. I like giving talks and presentations. I'm not inherently an extrovert. Like, I don't really enjoy speaking to just everybody, but I enjoy giving people information. So that's an area I can tap to. I can tap into training, tapping into seeing clients, and also teaching. So there are many areas that you can go into and kind of craft your career the way you want it to be. So there's a lot of opportunities, but it also comes back to how you are as a person. Do you enjoy doing this? If you just enjoy being in a hospital setting and just doing that, you can, but the competition is really high for that because a lot of people want that job security. So you might find that you're fighting for very limited seats. So that's something that you want to bear in mind as well. So I think a lot of helping profession is, except for the medical profession, I'm not sure. I think there are more doctors as well, male doctors as well. But other helping professions like nurses or psychologists or counselors, social workers, they're mostly women. So it is a very much women-dominated field. But what I observe is, though it's a women-dominated field, but that one guy in that room still has that privilege of being a guy, being a man. And whatever they say becomes like, wow, words of gold, words of wisdom. And it could be true, but you can actually see that difference. If the woman is saying the same thing, they'll be like, yeah, but there'll be a lot of rebuttal. But when the guy says it, it automatically is like, wow, it's eye-opening, right? But it could be the same thing. So even though it's a women-dominated field, I think just the general male privilege that exists in society can also come into this field, even though they are a minority. But I think it's a field where we need more men, because there are more men who are also coming up and talking about mental health issues, and you want to have that options for them to share with other men, and kind of like have that option for them to speak to different types of people, and I think we need that diversity in our field. And I think one thing that stops that, if you look at a gender perspective also, like women are generally, it's more acceptable for us to be in a nurturing kind of career, nurturing, caring career. And the mindset, unfortunately, is like these careers don't earn much, right? And you will see that when you come out and people will call you to give talks or presentations to big corporate companies, and they will expect you to do it for free because they think you're in a helping profession, you shouldn't be charging that much. Or even when they ask you to see somebody professionally, they expect your rates to be really, really low, which you don't get with other professions. Like, you go to the doctor, you pay the doctor what the doctor's fees are. You don't negotiate, you don't like haggle. But you will see that a lot in the helping profession. And I think because of that mindset that you can't earn much, you won't be earning much, a lot of men, where they expect to be the providers for their families, they expect to be the bigger bread winners, they might not be attracted to this kind of jobs, right? So I think that mindset needs to change, because even if you're in a helping profession, you still need to eat, you still need to, and it's still niche job. Like not everybody can do it. Like you're learning these skills, you're spending so much in undergrad, postgrad, and you continue paying for courses and workshops and books and stuff like that to continuously keep yourself updated. So that's all costs that needs to be reflected in the amount that you're earning. And I think for that, you need like a whole structural change in how people are viewing mental health issues. It is growing, but I think it also, it's growing, but it also needs to grow in a different way. Like, so if you look at it now, like, if you have medical doctors, you can just open a clinic and sit and people would come, right? But with our profession, or psychologists or counselors, we need to really market it, and you really need to make it safe, and people need to know a lot about what they're getting into before coming, because there's a lot of that barrier that needs to be crossed. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So you can't just open a center and just sit down, because even if people come, they don't want people to know that they're coming to you. It's not something like you can tell, like in Western worlds, they can say openly, I'm going to meet my shrink, or I'm going to see my therapist today. That kind of understanding is not there. So a lot of like prep work needs to go in to even get your clients, to build the trust that people have in you as a person, in you as a professional, before actually coming up to you and accessing your services. So that is a challenge right now. That is a challenge. And I think a lot of the younger psychologists or younger people that I know are going into social media and talking about it, and putting up information. So I get a lot of requests or messages from my social media, like asking me about, I'm going through this, these are my symptoms, yada yada yada. And then you give them all the information, but a lot of time cost is a problem. So they either can't afford the cost, or they can't continuously afford the cost, because it's not a one-time thing. It's not like you come once and you see me and then you are like miraculously cured, right? So you need to continuously. So that's another barrier as well. So I think it really depends on how you craft your career. So if making money is something that's important, it's important to all of us, right? But how can you make that money using the skills that you have? So you don't only think of one way. You have to diversify and think of different ways of bringing that knowledge to the masses, where they can benefit and you can also earn your living. So I think it's about being creative about that. Honestly, at this point, I think depending on which setting you are. So I think when you are in a clinic setting or a hospital setting, being a woman actually works to your advantage, because people obviously look at you as somebody who's softer, and somehow you have that more trusting relationship with when you see a woman compared to a man. They could be trusting as well, but trustworthy as well, but people generally have this impression. So when it's a helping profession, they want to share something, they feel more at ease sharing with a woman, because they feel like they'll be calmer and more understanding and stuff like that. So I think in that sense, it works to your advantage. But it doesn't work to your advantage so much in a corporate setting, because in a corporate setting, sometimes they have, even though you're telling the same thing, you're giving the same, the information is the same, but they almost have this feeling like, but this is not a woman's field. This is not where you belong. And so I don't need to listen to what you're saying as much. So that there might be this, not all the time, but there might be that block. And especially when you are dealing with people from corporate side, and you have to convince them about the importance of psychology, importance of mental health. And you're dealing with people who probably are very, very steeped in that stigma. Like I would have corporate companies reach out to us and say, oh, I need an employee assistance program. Like I need psychologists and counselors in our company. But then when you talk about them and how to craft it out, how to arrange this program, then they will tell you, yeah, but we don't want many people accessing it, then it will have a bad rapport in our company. So they want to have it, but they also don't want many people to access it. So it kind of like defeats the purpose. So trying to change this mindset, I feel sometimes it's easier if you're a man, because then they sit up and listen to you. When you are saying it as a woman, it often feels like it just falls on deaf ears. So that is one struggle. But of course, that experience can differ according to different people. If you have my male colleagues might tell you the same thing as well. So it's just this is from just my experience, from talking and from what I've observed in my surrounding. When I'm with a male counterpart, it often has a lot more effect when they say something compared to, and you could be saying the same thing, but it often has a different effect. The gender part of it, like whether it's workplaces or, whether it's also making it inclusive, it's about us walking the talk as well. So if I am in a space, right, it's about taking up space in that area and talking about these things. So wherever I go, whatever I do, whichever role I am in, I don't shy away from talking about gender issues. And I don't be like, oh, what would people think? I shouldn't say this about what I believe. I would actually voice it out. And that was not something that came easy. Like many years back, I wouldn't have done it. But that's something that you need to cultivate and start talking about. Because when you have conversations, when you start talking about things, that is when you kind of shift perspectives. You shift people's mindsets. So like when you're talking, when you're having workplace conversations, especially in school, sometimes you can see like, when there's this as teachers who have shared this with me, when they are allocating classes for different teachers to teach, and the mindset, especially in Malaysia, is like, oh, if it's home sciences or it's gardening and stuff like that, so let the female teachers take it. So these kind of things come up. So it's about you questioning that, no, the female teachers don't need to do this. Anybody can do it, because it's a life skill. Everyone needs to know this, right? So it's about changing that, having that conversation, having that dialogue, and being comfortable enough to speak up about these kind of things. And when you talk about inclusivity, how are we being inclusive to the people, even within women in our profession? Like we have women who do not have like binary gender identity. We have women who are probably lesbians, women who asexual. So we have different types of women within different cultures, different backgrounds. How are we inclusive to these people in the way we speak, the way we include them in activities, in the way we think about their narratives and their perspective? So all these things kind of set in motion the whole idea of diversity and inclusion. So then it will also extend to men and different types of people in society joining us. So I think that needs to start from a very, very basic level. I always start with like myself. What can I do? What am I doing now to impact, whether it's gender relations or impact diversity or inclusion stuff? So if I'm not doing something right, then I want to focus on that first. Because if I'm doing something right, I can influence people around me, and then that slowly creates an impact. And also, like, I think even for me, I never realized it, because I think I've been privileged to have friends who are more or less from the same background or the same thinking. But sometimes when I meet people who are not from, like, I make new friends, and then I realize that it's very, very different ideologies that people have. And I think as a psychologist, sometimes you also need to be aware of that, because not everybody is on the same plane as you are. Not everybody agrees with the same thing. So like one example I could give you is when you're talking about gender equality, when you're talking about, it's not a concept that you use when it benefits you, when it's cool for you to use it. So I see a lot of people use it when they're fighting for their own rights. Like they're like, no, I deserve this. I need this time for myself. I need to do all that. But then when those tables are switched, like for example, when you're getting married, I have had this friend who told me that, oh, I won't marry somebody who doesn't have a house and doesn't have a car and because he needs to take care of me. So then it's a very different thing altogether, because I'm like, okay, you're saying that you are an independent woman who can take care of yourself, but then you are expecting somebody to prove their financial statements for you to marry them, right? So then that's already a big, like, if I was a guy, I would be like calling somebody out on this kind of things, right? But that's their values. If they generally don't subscribe to the gender equality thing, then that's fine. I mean, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. But when you subscribe to these kind of things, you want to also be very congruent with what you're saying and what you're doing. So even in your own life, you cannot be saying like, I'm a feminist, or I'm very, I believe in gender equality, and then be that kept woman also, when you don't have to, and making excuses for yourself. So these are all the things that you can start thinking about when you're carving your identity in this field, or in whatever you believe. It might not be gender equality, it could be anything. It could be you're very, very passionate about nature, you're very passionate about, I don't know, animals, right? And how you act that out in your real life matters. For all women and girls, you know, being different, being who you want to be, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of I saw this meme one day, being a rebel is not for the lighthearted. So it's not going to be easy. There are going to be people who are going to go against you, but you want to be a rebel with a cause. Like, you need to know why you're rebelling. What is the end goal? What do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve this? Because I've gone through a period of life where I was fighting with people randomly online. Like, they say something and I'll be like, no, that's wrong, I'm going to call you out. And you know, then eventually you realize that's not really going to help you. That's not going to help change perspectives. That's not going to help do anything. So you're just wasting all this energy, all this time, and all these resources for what? To change this person's mind. And it's not going to change, because that's what they believe in, and they're entitled to what they believe in. So how can you then, on a larger level, bring the same passion, bring the same anger, bring the same belief, and make bigger changes? So you want to also plan that out. So you're not just simply fighting with everybody, just, you know, making noise, but there's no substance. So you want to really craft out, what are you doing substantially? Like what you guys are doing with this Girl Up, I think it's amazing. Like, to kind of influence women to come and have fellowships of women to come up and talk about, you know, women in corporate spaces, women in different, you know, career spaces, and talk about their difficulties. And you kind of engaging people to start thinking about that, and you're highlighting that there is a difference, and what can we do to bridge that difference. So these are some things that are substantial. So if you were all doing it on your own and just preaching to different people, it might not have the same impact as all of you coming together and doing it with an intention and with cause. So I would say that's really important. What's your intention? What's your game plan? And go do it. And it's not going to be easy. It's definitely not going to be easy, but that's expected. But don't let that stop you. So I'm Puveshini, and I'm a woman, and my career of choice is being a clinical psychologist. And I think women all around the world can choose whatever career you want to be, because you deserve it. That's your basic human right, to be whoever you want to be. And you can achieve that by putting in the hard work, planning it out, and always being adaptable and flexible. And I think a lot of times people think that's the weakness of being a woman, because you're always adapting and always being flexible. But I think in this moving, fast-paced world, I think that's our biggest strength. So always be on your toes and work hard and work smart towards what you want. And all the best.